You all for being here. I want to thank the governor, lieutenant governor, for joining us, the Solicitor General of the state of Connecticut, Mike Skold, who's leading our efforts in coordination with California. We are here to make it clear that the state of Connecticut objects to the use of American soldiers against American citizens on American soil in California and Los Angeles under these circumstances. Let me just say that as an American, I'm deeply concerned and troubled by the President's deployment of National Guards people and U.S. active duty Marines in Los Angeles. I realize we don't yet know the scope of the orders and the mission for active duty Marines, but I think it is safe to say that the President has packed a powder keg in Los Angeles, and there's an extreme risk of a broader explosion of violence and harm to the people of Los Angeles and California. And he has created an unreasonable risk to public safety. I think it's also really important to recognize how we got here. What we're seeing across the country, including in Connecticut, are off-the-street arrests. Feels like American citizens even, or lawful immigrants are being renditioned off the street by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, taken off the street. In Los Angeles, I understand in talking with the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta, that these arrests happen in donut shops. There was a high-profile, there's no other way to put it, arrest of a national labor leader, David Huerta, who was injured in the process of being detained and arrested while he, as far as I can tell, and my understanding from talking to the Attorney General, was peaceably assembling and observing and protesting the actions by ICE, which is his right. And of course, we see it locally in Worcester, Massachusetts, this horrifying video of a daughter and her mom being taken off the street in an explosive and incendiary and provocative way. I said in the first week of this administration that the President has declared war on the American people. I meant it figuratively then. I pray to God that this literally does not become true. So I'm in close communication with General Bonta in California. Incidentally, General Bonta spent 11 years in New Haven, so he's one of us. And so I talked to Rob last night, and I talked to him for a couple reasons. Number one, my fellow attorneys general and I want to be clear to General Bonta and the state of California and the people of California that we support them and that we want to be a resource for them and we want to be helpful. But it's also important for me as your Attorney General to understand what's happening in California, in Los Angeles, so I can inform the governor and advise the governor. And so we can understand what the implications are for Connecticut, what it means for Connecticut, and how we might have to respond. The state of California, acting through the Attorney General, has sued the President and Secretary Hegseth and the federal government for their unlawful use of National Guards people and active duty military in Los Angeles. They purport to invoke 10 U.S. Code 12406. That's the power the President purports to invoke. That statute is pretty clear. You can only deploy National Guards people in the United States under Section 12406 if there's an invasion. There is no invasion in Los Angeles, or a rebellion. There is no rebellion in Los Angeles, and that's the basis of the lawsuit. It also requires the consent and cooperation of the governor of California, and he does not give it. He has objected forcefully to this action. And so to say the use of 12406 under these circumstances is unprecedented is accurate, because there is no basis for the use of National Guards people when the governor hasn't asked for it, and where Los Angeles police and state police in California had the situation under control. You can invoke 12406 if the president and the federal government are unable to discharge their functions and if local law enforcement can't do their jobs. That is not true in this case. I have talked to the Attorney General of California. He says that LAPD and state police in California had this under control. And what we've done now is by bringing troops in, that more troops invites more protesters, and it starts to pile up on itself. And that's why I said he is packing a powder keg. The other thing I want to note, you're going to hear this Latin term, posse comitatus, okay? That means literally that you can't deploy U.S. active military for law enforcement in the United States, okay? And so the use of active duty Marines, I believe, is unlawful in this way. And so based on those claims, the Attorney General has gone to federal court seeking to enjoin and to stop the president from continuing to threaten the safety of people in Los Angeles in this way. Let me say, on behalf of the state of Connecticut, we're going to support California. We stand with California, we stand with the state of California, the people of California, and that I and New York and Massachusetts and others will do everything we can in court to support the people of California. I just want to say clearly that we call on the President of the United States to pull back. Please pull back before this escalates any further and something extraordinary, some permanent damage is done to people in California and to our country. Let LAPD and state police do their jobs. They did not ask you to come in and help. They don't need your help. And if they do need your help, they will ask. And I know that the last time that this happened was in 1992 during Rodney King. We all remember that. And that was a totally different situation that did get out of hand. And they did ask for help, and they received it. But in this case, it is not warranted. I will let the governor speak to how we will respond in Connecticut. Suffice it to say, we will do everything within our power and authority to prevent this from happening here in Connecticut. There's no reason to expect that it will, and I will let the governor speak to that. To the people of our state, what should you do? You should continue to speak out. You should continue to exercise your rights to speak and protest lawfully and peacefully. That is your right. Some people have said here in Connecticut that the protest is American. There's nothing more American than the First Amendment. There's nothing more important than religion, speech, press, assembly, petition, the 5 pillars of the First Amendment. And the people of this state should feel safe, right, in exercising those rights and know that we will protect the people of this state in the exercise of those rights lawfully and peacefully. The final thing I'll say before I turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor is this: a reminder to the President and to our sister states. This is the sovereign state of Connecticut. The people of this state are sovereign. When we act, when the governor acts, when I act, we don't act as Ned Lamont and William Tong. We act as the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut has delegated, with 49 other states, limited powers to the federal government. That is the design of our country. That is what the Constitution says. The states are sovereign. And the states join together in our consent, by our consent, in a federation known as the United States of America. We delegated limited powers. Those limited powers do not include the deployment of American soldiers against American citizens on American soil. We never agreed to that, and we never will. With that, let me turn it over to Lieutenant Governor.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for your leadership on this critical issue. There is no more important right than our First Amendment. the right to peaceful protest is the hallmark of our democracy. And it's our right to vocally disagree with the current administration and to participate in peaceful protests. The right to speak out and to assemble are freedoms that should be protected, not threatened or attacked. Since President Trump has been elected, we've witnessed thousands of peaceful protests across our country, hundreds of them in Connecticut. And here in our state, nearly every day, you will see these protests on bridges, on street corners, in front of federal buildings, parks, and more. And I've had the great privilege of attending many of these large protests, as have the Attorney General and our Governor. And I plan to join several this weekend on No King's Day, on the 14th. And already today, I have had calls from citizens in our state asking if we plan to deploy our National Guard. Now, I'll tell you, on April 5th, thousands of people showed up to the Capitol, to greens, to parks across our state. The National Guard was not needed because all of the protests were peaceful. President Trump has displayed an extreme callousness and cruelty as he has engaged in a crackdown on immigration in our country. And our residents have the right to speak out against that. People are frustrated, people are heartbroken, people are angry, people are concerned about the future of our democracy, and people are exercising their freedom of speech and the freedom to assemble to protect the freedoms we have right now in our country. And as the Attorney General noted, the President has a very limited right to use the National Guard and our military in very extreme and rare circumstances. And those circumstances don't exist in California. And I believe that the President has violated federal law by sending National Guard members and members of our military to California. And he's also wasting $143 million taxpayer dollars in an effort that is not necessary or needed, and which could incite violence. In our state, we call up the National Guard in extreme circumstances, like Hurricane Sandy, or the Hawthorne fire in Berlin, or to help us during the pandemic. So it's just very distressing to see the President violating federal law and our Constitution. And why is he doing that? Apparently to terrify and stifle people who disagree with him. This is a hallmark of a dictator and a hallmark of an authoritarian regime. The President should stop talking about law and order, and he should start respecting our federal laws and our United States Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll just add, I see the interns from the Comptroller's Office and the Attorney General's Office, and we've heard from Susan and William that the right to protest is a hallmark of American liberties. And yet you look on TV right now and you see the demonstrations in Los Angeles, now Austin and Dallas and Seattle, and the demonstrations are ramping up, and some of them are getting more violent. Yeah. You have the right to protest. You have the right to protest peacefully. You protest peacefully, you enhance the cause, and people listen to your message. If the protest turns violent, sometimes that distracts from your message. It's the wrong thing to do. I'd like to say that we've been through this before in this state. I remember after George Floyd was killed, and a lot of people turning out, and I was really proud of Connecticut. People turned out, they protested peacefully. We didn't need the National Guard, we didn't need the federal government. We know how to handle this ourselves. We handle this with respect, we look out for the protesters, make sure they treat people with respect as well. I think sometimes that the president seemed a little eager to send federal troops and militarize the situation in Los Angeles. Just like to say, our state police, our municipal police, they know how to work together with the citizens, know how to keep us safe. We don't need that outside interference. And that's what I hope we've learned going forward. Watch carefully what's going on around the country right now. There are a lot of Twitter entreaties to ramp up the nature of the protests right now. I understand the frustration there is out there. Whatever you do it peacefully. We'll be there to keep you safe.
Yes. Questions?
What is the game plan in a situation where we have peaceful protests and the president tries to do what he's doing in California, here in Connecticut? What actions can we take in that situation?
We're not going to get to that point because I know that the governor and Rennell Higgins, the commissioner of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, are focused, as we were during George Floyd, on maintaining order. Make no mistake, if people break the law, they will be held accountable. And if you commit an infraction and violate the law in a way that requires you and demands that you be arrested, you will be arrested. And we will not tolerate lawlessness in Connecticut. And frankly, I know the governor is committed to making sure that there is no cause for the president to even think about deploying troops in Connecticut.
I think William said it right. Look, I talked to Rennell yesterday. Look, when it comes to our state police, we're there early. If we see a potential disturbance, say on an overpass over a highway that could be potentially dangerous, we go in and with respect say, this is not the way to protest. You're not going to be able to do it here. Get there early. Tell people, how they're going to deport themselves. I don't want to give the president any pretext to think he can come into Connecticut and militarize the situation. That just makes the situation worse.
Yeah. I should also note, this is why I'm on the phone with Rob Bonta last night, because it's important to understand what's happening there and how California is going to respond, because that informs, Connecticut's legal strategy, if it should ever come to that.
What is the role and legal standing of Connecticut in the California litigation?
We're not a party to that litigation.
You're not.
No.
Could you just go back to the SG wants to weigh in on this?
That doesn't mean we won't weigh in some way. We're not a party.
On the Title X authorities that the president has asserted, you mentioned 2 points which he would probably dispute. One being the fact local authorities, as you say, have been able to contain this. The messaging we've heard from the Trump administration is that the local authorities have not been able to contain it.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that if it just comes down to a dispute on who has control of the situation?
The federal judge will make that determination. And I have every confidence that the federal judges of the Northern District of California, right? Northern District of California, and the Ninth Circuit and the U.S. Supreme Court will see it our way.
And on the point of an invasion, right, you are well familiar that the administration is trying to lay the groundwork that they can act under that provision of Title X. Your response to that?
They're wrong.
Are other states doing what you're doing, and is it largely symbolic, or does it have teeth?
I mean, I don't think any of the actions that we've taken have been symbolic. Since this president took the oath of office for the second time, we've sued more than 20 times, and we have largely been successful in stopping draconian cuts in the billions upon billions of dollars to the states, including the state of Connecticut. So I don't want to overstate the level of success. It's working, mostly. It's going to get harder, but the courts and judges are doing their jobs, and we're doing the best we can in supporting California. California obviously is the party in interest. They're going to take the lead, but we have a lot to learn from California and what's happening here. As I said earlier, me, Tish James, Andrea Campbell, we're all focused on this. Attorneys General, we're talking real time all the time about how we as a community of states will confront this crisis.
I believe during the LA riots, they brought in the guard, and maybe during Black Lives Matter, you probably know more. What strikes you as so very different in this situation?
I I don't have the statistics on what was happening because I didn't bring that paper with me, but I did read earlier the statistics about what was happening during Rodney King, and the level of violence was dramatically different than where we are now. There's been a lot of pictures and images and information swirling around social media and the internet, and there have been a number of articles written today about how much misinformation and disinformation is out there. Let me tell you what I know. I know the Attorney General of California, who is a constitutional officer and has taken an oath, right, told me they had it under control and that it was nowhere near any universe in which you needed to ask for the help of the National Guard.
Maybe things were flaring up before, but I can tell you one thing, Sue. As soon as you militarize the situation, you poured gasoline on the
Yes.
flames and made things a lot worse. How about the Hippocratic Oath? Don't do any harm. Right now, I think our state police, municipal police, working together will keep us safe as they always have.
What do you think of Governor Newsom's actions towards Trump right now, and how that may be escalating the situation, or you feel he's in a situation where he has no choice?
Well, I think the president seemed eager to send First Guard, despite the governor's efforts, and now Marines into this situation. So I think he brought the challenge to the table.
You just offered a note of protesting peacefully. There are protests scheduled around Connecticut Saturday morning. Did Commissioner Higgins share any intel that prompted you to offer that caution or that plea for peaceful protest?
Oh, not so much. I can tell you that Commissioner Higgins is monitoring the online traffic very carefully, see where some of these demonstrations are, probably get there ahead of the curve, make sure we have some folks to maintain the peace. We always have, we always will.
And Mark, I'll say that this is something that is on the minds of people in Connecticut because there are people all across the state who are planning dozens of these No Kings protests, and they were concerned enough to call me to ask whether the governor was planning to send in the National Guard, and we talked about it, and why would we do that when we had such peaceful protests on April 5th and since then?
Yes.
You said you don't think there will be a pretext or a reason for Trump to send in the military here. He's shown over 10 years that he doesn't care about facts, what's going on the ground. If he wants to send military, he might try it and escalate the situation like he's done in California. So what do you do then?
Call the Attorney General. Look, all I can do as a governor is make sure that we do our job. That is, keep the peace. Don't give him any pretext to do it. You say, what happens? He doesn't care if he comes in anyway. Then you're going to have the courts and the legal system to stand up. But I'm going to make sure that we keep the peace here in Connecticut.
Yeah, that's not where we are. To say not even close is such an understatement. This state has a track record, and our track record is of people sometimes forcefully and aggressively exercising their First Amendment rights, but lawfully and peaceably, okay? And so the fact that we're passionate about it, that we're loud about it, is not illegal. And in my memory, and the governor referenced George Floyd, we did it the right way in this state, and I have every expectation that we will continue to do it the right way. And so I don't think it's helpful to indulge, the what ifs, except to say, if something happens that is unlawful and unwarranted, we will act immediately. And I will act. And so make no mistake about that. We're ready. We've been ready. We talk about it and we plan for it. But we're not even close to there because Connecticut is safe, peaceful. We have strong opinions. We express those opinions. We're doing it right now. And all of what we do as a general matter is lawful.
Have either of the two of you had conversations with General Yvonne or his judge advocates about how you would respond in a situation where the president federalizes the Connecticut
Let me,
National Guard?
before the governor jumps in, I'll let the governor speak. Let me just say, we're not going to divulge the contents of our privileged communications. Obviously, we talk, right? And obviously, our lawyers talk because that's our job. So I'm not going to talk about, you know, our private privileged conversations with General Evon or Commissioner Higgins or anybody else. Suffice it to say, we're on it.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
What are your reactions to, there have been reports of ICE actions here in Connecticut, high school student in Meriden,
Yeah.
folks in Southington yesterday. What are your reactions to that, and what would be your message to folks who are outraged and want to show their outrage?
Speak out. Speak out. Do it peacefully, lawfully, but be passionate, be loud. Don't put immigrants and immigrant families at risk. I've said this from the beginning, back in 1.0, when, and frankly, under both Republican and Democratic presidents, Secure Communities was under President Obama. The birth of the Trust Act was under President Obama. And during that time, residents spoke up in support of their neighbors and their friends, and sometimes they would say, please, look at this immigrant family and don't take them. I would say maybe that's not a good strategy right now. I would not highlight people and put them at risk, but I would on the principle, advocate for your neighbors in your community and against law enforcement activity that you think is not productive and not helpful to your community, but do so peacefully and lawfully, and don't interfere and follow the law. Here's one thing that I want to say, which is there's this overhang and suggestion that that we're defying federal law, that we're breaking the law. We were briefly on this list of states and municipalities were briefly on this list of quote-unquote sanctuary jurisdictions, and then the list disappeared in like 48 hours. And I was asked to respond, the governor responded as well, and my response was, why are we on this list? Connecticut is not a sanctuary jurisdiction. What are you talking about? There's no law, there's no regulation that says the word sanctuary. That it suggests that we are in violation of federal law or nullifying federal law or flouting federal law. Wrong, we are not. What we do here in Connecticut is in compliance with federal law. And I've been very clear, our policy is to respect, honor, and protect immigrant and immigrant families in compliance with the law.
I'll just add to that, if I could. Look, I see mass deportations going on in Boston. I see mass deportations going on in Southern California. As you point out, here in Connecticut, so far, we haven't seen that. We've had more than a few incidents. I say two things. One, don't let them fool you saying we're just going after criminals and those who are dangerous.
Yes.
We're already doing that every day.
Yes.
And we work with the feds where necessary. What I worry about is they're picking up people at the courthouse, and now they're getting closer and closer to the schoolhouse door. And all that means is it's less likely those people go to the courthouse where they should, and our kids are less likely to go to school. It's a really short-sighted and damaging way to go ahead.
The AG brought up the Trust Act, and I'm wondering from the governor and the Attorney General, do you think Connecticut's Trust Act is robust enough for this current moment?
I think we're doing everything we can.
Because there are advocates who would say that they want to see it stronger or more robust.
If I could do more for hardworking, loyal, productive immigrants and immigrant families, I would. We're doing everything we can.
I think the Trust Act is pretty good, and we strengthened it a little bit this last session. What the Trust Act says is, if you're a felon, you committed a crime, you're violent, you're a potential danger to our streets and community, we're working with people, we're getting you off the street to keep people safe. If you're a jaywalker or a kid who is a dreamer at Meriden High School, we're doing everything we can to protect you, in the sense that we don't ask people their immigration status. That's not our job. Our job is to keep people safe, and make people feel safe when they go to school.
And remember why we have a Trust Act and why it's called the Trust Act. We have a Trust Act so that state and local law enforcement focus on their jobs, which is to keep people in our communities and in our state safe. It is to maintain trust between people and local law enforcement. So if your house is on fire, your car's getting broken into, your house is getting broken into, you don't hesitate for a second because you're worried about your immigration status. You pick up the phone and you call 911. That is the whole point of the Trust Act.
Governor, you brought up the narrative situation at Maloney High School. Do you have any new information about that? I know the details were very sketchy at that point. Have you learned anything since the last time we spoke?
I have, but I think I'm going to keep it confidential at this point, so.
Have you been in touch with the family? Are they okay, or?
I can tell you the superintendent certainly has been in touch.
Anything else?
What's your message to mixed status and undocumented folks who are terrified in this moment?
This is among the most heartbreaking of truths about where we are, and that is in 70% of households in which there is a person or a person with a complicated immigration story, like my dad had, over 50 years ago, that they're a mixed status household, that you've got people who may be undocumented or have a complicated immigration story, but you have American citizen children, you have an American citizen spouse, you have somebody who's on temporary status who is beyond lawful, in their status. This is what happened in Worcester. And so what the president is doing in many cases, he has the right and prerogative to do in terms of ICE enforcement. The federal government has broad authority over immigration and customs enforcement. And that's a fact. But a lot of what they're doing is unreasonable and excessive, and in some cases unlawful. And we've been successful in stopping a lot of these actions, but he has hurt and is going to hurt a lot of people in the process. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.